Oh, hi. Good evening. Welcome. Um, Salem's Lot was the second ever novel published by Stephen King. Or that Stephen King, authors don't do the publishing, do they? A publishing house does. So Stephen King, right? Jesus wept. Stephen King's first novel ever was Carrie, I believe, she says without checking. And his second ever novel was called Salem's Lot, short for Jerusalem's Lot. It was published in 1975, and in 1979 it was made into a TV miniseries starring David Soul, which a lot of people will say gave them the absolute heebie-jeebies. I've never seen the original TV series or TV miniseries. I didn't really know the story of Salem's Lot, but it has been remade, reimagined, so I thought I would give it a whirl. And it was very entertaining. So here's the thing, right? Stephen King is undeniably one of the greatest writers. Evs. Just is. I mean, popular, successful, award-winning, critically acclaimed. Not all of his work, but a lot of his work. And I've read a handful of his books. Probably 10 or less of his books, and when you consider how many he's written, considering he's been publishing books since the early 70s, it's a lot. And I've always enjoyed his work, but famously it hasn't always translated very well to screen, or rather he's not always a fan of the adaptations of his work. I think of the books I've read, they tend to be very atmospheric and unsettling, and it isn't always easy to convey that to the screen. One of his earliest books, The Shining, was famously adapted by Stanley Kubrick for the screen and starred Jack Nicholson, and it's a much loved horror film. I personally don't think it's very good. I mean, it is good, but it's not great, and I've read the book, and the book is better. My favourite film of all time, Stand By Me, is based on a novella by Stephen King. And when in Salem's Lot, the Royal River got a mention, I was like, way, because the Royal River features in Stand By Me. So, yeah, Stephen King and big screen or even small screen adaptations, it's a difficult relationship. So I haven't read Salem's Lot. I've just checked the Wikipedia page for the book. I was just wondering when it was originally published. And apparently he said in 2 separate interviews that this is his favourite novel of his. Now, he may have said that a very long time ago, and he's since published books that he likes more, but apparently this was his favourite. I can see why. Now, as I say, I don't know how faithful an adaptation it is. I go back to the fact I haven't read the book. I may now try or get it as an audiobook because ADHD won't let me sit still and read. But I really enjoyed this. So it's a vampire story. Most people probably knew that, but as I say, I didn't. And actually, once it started and I got into it, I was like, there's a famous image from the 70s miniseries that I do recall, which is the little boy vampire at the bedroom window. I do have that image in my head. And like I say, that's probably what gave a lot of people the heebie-jeebies back in the day. But I didn't know anything about it. It is the story of an author called Ben Mears. A lot of King's work features authors, writers. The Shining, he's a writer. In Misery, obviously, he is a novelist. Stand By Me, Gordy grows up to be a writer. And I'm sure there's many, 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 many more. Secret Window, that's definitely, there's a lot of writers in his work. And Ben Mears is a writer. He previously lived in Salem's Lot as a kid. He left when he was 9 when his parents were killed in a car accident. And now a grown man and a published author himself, he has come back to the lot, as the locals call it, to try and write his next book. And he is fascinated by the big old house on the hill of the town. Salem's Lot is a small town, your classic Maine small town where everybody knows everybody and it just kind of goes about its business. The film is set in the 70s. I like that it was set in the 70s. I like that they hadn't tried to bring it into the present day. I also like that it wasn't comically 70s. It wasn't all big wide flares, and it was just you could tell it was the 70s by the cars, by the decor, by the clothes, but it wasn't over the top. So he comes back to town, and his arrival coincides with the setting up of a brand new antique shop, and apparently some distinguished but mysterious Austrian gentleman or Eastern European gentleman buying the old Marsden house, which is the house on the hill. So it turns out that Mr. Barlow, who's bought the house, is in fact a vampire, and he plans to turn all of Salem's lot into vampires. And that's kind of it. But I like the way it was paced. I like the spread of it. I like the forming of the little band of rebels of Ben and Susan, who's the girl he meets and starts a relationship with, of the doctor, who was played by Alfrea Woodard. Ben Mears is played by Lewis Pullman. And stupidly, I spent the whole film going, God, that guy looks like Bill Pullman. And then remembering that his son's now an actor, because I sat and did exactly the same thing. Was he in Top Gun Maverick? I'm sure he was. I'm sure he's in Top Gun Maverick. So yeah, Lewis Pullman looks like his dad. If this film had been made 20 years ago, would have been his dad in the role. Who else is in Alfrea Woodard? William Sadler. Bill Sadler plays the sheriff, and various other people dotted about. So this little band of people form who are going to stand against Mr. Barlow and Mr. Straker and the vampire plague that is spreading through Salem's lot. I like that it observes and respects vampire lore. I've been obsessed with vampires. If you'd asked me when I was 7 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up, Katie? I would have said, I want to be a vampire. I don't really know where that came from, but I definitely did. I read books about them. There was a series of books called Vlad the Drac. There was a book called The Last Vampire by Willis Hall that I loved. I remember standing waiting for a bus when I was about 6. This is so weird. And there was a bus stop post, like bus shelter poster for The Lost Boys. And I memorised the tagline. And I still know it now. And I'm not going to recite it, but that's been in my head since I was 6 years old. And then obviously did see The Lost Boys, but not when I was 6. Just like vampires. Big Buffy fan. You know, your Buffys, your Twilights. So yeah, I just like that it observed vampire lore. They have to stick to the shadows. They don't like direct sunlight. Crucifixes are a no-no. Not a big fan of holy water. Just like all of that, stake through the heart. I like that it just respected the vampire lore. And it wasn't like, but yes, on a Tuesday, if the sun is in the sky but the wind blows from the east, then they can in fact go out in the daylight. You're just like, oh, sod off. Just respect the lore. They have to be invited in. Don't like the sun, crucifixes, garlic. Actually, there's no mention of garlic in the film, I don't think. And nobody tries to use it, garlic bread to ward off vampires. But yeah, it was just really good. It was perhaps a tiny bit long. It was just about 2 hours, and I was like, could have been a little bit leaner. But I liked the way it looked. It was well paced. It was well shot. It had moments of humour, but not too much. Like, it didn't play it for laughs. It was just, and it was the way it was like, it was a small town in Maine, because it always is with Stephen King, and it's quite isolated. Obviously, it's the 70s. It wouldn't work, I don't think, in the modern age, because you'd be Googling ways to kill vampires, or you'd just be sending out a distress signal, or you'd be posting on Facebook, help! Town is full of vampires! OMG. But they can't. They just have to try their best to stand alone against them, and nobody's safe. Quite a lot of people die. It's properly creepy in places. The big cheese head vampire, not cheesehead, the big cheese / head vampire looks proper creepy. Great fun. Well done indeed. Lovely bit of business. In the month, I was going to say just in time for Halloween. In the month of Halloween, I thoroughly enjoyed time spent in Salem's Lot. But I never want to visit Maine. Please and thank you. Okay, thanks for listening. Katie out.